in the heart of a city where dreams are often crushed before they even take flight. Marcus, a man marked by a troubled past and tattoos that tell a story of hardship, has one goal: survival. But the world around him offers little hope, and every door seems closed. That is, until a controversial policy begins to shift the tides. As the country braces for change, Marcus is about to find himself standing at the crossroads of his life. Little does he know, the very policies that many have condemned are about to give him a chance to prove that even the most broken can be rebuilt, that even a man like him can rise above. But as Marcus steps into an unknown world, he faces challenges that will test everything he believes in. What happens next is a story of redemption, struggle, and unexpected triumph. One that asks, what happens when a man's past no longer defines his future? How far will Marcus go to claim the life he never thought possible? The twist? It's all thanks to a man many have called controversial, but one who may just turn out to be Marcus's greatest ally, Donald Trump. But just when Marcus begins to taste the sweetness of success, everything he's fought for is at risk. Will his past drag him back down? Or can he break free once and for all? Before we begin, let us know where you are watching from. And if you believe in fighting for the helpless and showing kindness to humanity, be sure to like and subscribe for more. Let us begin.
Marcus had always dreamed of a better life, one that wasn't dictated by the hardships of his surroundings. He was a young man in his late 20s, living in a city that had become a battleground between opportunity and struggle. His life had never been easy, and the tattoos on his arms and neck were a constant reminder of his past mistakes, choices he made when life seemed too heavy to carry alone. They were symbols of rebellion, of the days when he didn't care about tomorrow because today was already too much to handle. But life had a way of forcing people to face their choices, and Marcus was no exception. He was unemployed, drifting from one dead-end job to another, always getting stuck at the same barrier: his past. His tattoos, often seen as a mark of trouble, made it hard for him to secure steady work. Society seemed to view him as a problem to be solved, not a person to be understood. How many times had he walked into an interview, only to be dismissed with a raised eyebrow and a barely concealed judgment? Too many to count. He wasn't alone in this struggle. His neighborhood, once vibrant with hope, had seen better days. Unemployment was rampant, and many of his friends had fallen into the same cycle of temporary jobs and no future. The streets were filled with immigrants, many of whom had arrived in the country to find the same opportunity Marcus had been chasing his whole life. But in his eyes, they were getting jobs that should have gone to Americans. He wasn't racist, but he felt overlooked, as though his place in society had been taken by someone else. It wasn't just the immigrants who were succeeding. It was the system that seemed to work in their favor. As Marcus sat in his cramped apartment one evening, he couldn't help but wonder, was he truly a victim of circumstance, or had he simply never been given a real chance? Mike, his best friend, had always been a source of comfort during those tough nights when the weight of the world seemed unbearable. Mike was working in construction, doing okay for himself, but even he wasn't immune to the frustrations that came with the job market. "Look, man," Mike said one evening, "you've got to start thinking about the bigger picture. You know Trump's been cracking down on immigration, right? It's creating more opportunities for people like us." Marcus stared at him, unsure of what Mike meant. "What does that have to do with me? I'm just another guy trying to find a job. I don't have time for politics." Mike leaned forward, his voice lower, more serious. "It's simple. Trump's policies on immigration, especially deportation, are changing the landscape. You're not the only one who feels like they've been left behind. But guess what? There's a shift happening. Jobs are opening up now that companies aren't relying on illegal labor to fill positions. There's hope for people who've been ignored for years, man. People like you." Marcus shook his head, skeptical. "I don't know, Mike. It's all just talk. Everyone says they want change, but nothing ever changes for guys like me." But Mike wasn't giving up. "Look, I get it. I do. But if you don't give it a shot, nothing will change. I've seen it, Marcus. The people who succeed are the ones who take a chance, even when they don't believe in it. You're always complaining about how things aren't fair, right? This is your chance to change that. For the first time in a while, Marcus thought about what Mike was saying. Could it really be true? Could these new policies open doors for him? Maybe it was time to stop blaming the world and start taking a little responsibility. But what was the harm in trying? His Aunt Ruby, who had raised him after his parents passed, always told him that life didn't hand out easy answers. You're not going to get where you want by staying in the same place, she'd say. If you want something different, you've got to make a change. But don't wait for the world to give it to you. Go get it yourself. Could this be the change he had been waiting for? Was this the break he'd been hoping for, or just another dead end in the long list of disappointments? Marcus decided to take a step forward, even though he wasn't sure what that step would lead to. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for the world to come to him. Maybe he needed to go out and find his place in it. Have you ever felt like the world is against you, only to realize that a small change in perspective can open doors you never thought possible? As the days went by, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. It wasn't just the buzz about the new immigration policies, it was something deeper. The world around him felt like it was shifting in a way he couldn't quite put into words. Maybe, just maybe, there was hope for someone like him, a man with a troubled past, struggling to make ends meet in a society that often seemed more interested in his mistakes than in his potential. One afternoon, as he sat on the worn couch in his apartment, scrolling through job listings, something caught his eye. A company was hiring for positions that required local workers, positions that seemed to be a direct result of the immigration policies Marcus had heard about. According to the listing, the company was offering job opportunities to American citizens, even those with rough backgrounds, as long as they were willing to work hard and prove themselves. Marcus stared at the ad, wondering if this was the opportunity Mike had been talking about. He had heard rumors of companies opening up more positions to local workers, but he never imagined it could apply to him. With a hesitant breath, he decided to take a leap of faith and apply. At first, he didn't think he stood a chance. He knew the stigma that came with his appearance, his tattoos, his rough demeanor, and his history of failed attempts at steady employment. But something told him to take the chance. After all, what was the worst that could happen? Another rejection? He was used to that. The next day, he received a call from the company's HR department. The woman on the other end of the line, Sarah, spoke with a warm tone that immediately put him at ease. She told him that they were impressed with his application and that he was invited for an interview. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness bubble up inside him. He had no idea what to expect, but for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to believe that this could be different. The interview was unlike any he had experienced before. Gone were the cold, judgmental glances, the dismissive attitudes that often came with his background. Instead, Sarah asked him about his life, his experiences, and his aspirations. They didn't focus on his tattoos or his past mistakes. Those things didn't define who he was now. For the first time, someone seemed to see him for who he was today, not who he had been yesterday. During the interview, the CEO of the company, Tom, made it clear that the reason they were expanding their hiring efforts was directly linked to the changes in immigration laws. They were a growing company, and they needed American workers, people who had been overlooked or underrepresented in the job market for too long. Tom explained how the policies under the current administration had allowed businesses like theirs to focus on hiring local talent, opening doors for people who had previously been shut out. This company was built on the idea of giving people a second chance, Tom said, his voice steady but full of conviction. We believe in hard work, and we believe in giving everyone an opportunity to prove themselves. We've always looked for the right fit, regardless of background, and now, with these changes, we're seeing more potential than ever. Marcus listened intently, unsure of whether to believe it all. It was hard to imagine that a company, let alone a high-profile one, would be willing to look past his past and see his potential. But the word stuck with him. A second chance. An opportunity to show who he could be, not just who he had been. He left the interview feeling a strange sense of hope. Could it be possible that the policies Marcus had once seen as a distant political issue could actually help him? Could they open a door to a future he had long ago written off as unreachable? As Marcus walked back to his apartment, he felt a shift inside of him. It wasn't just about the job, it was about the possibility of change. For years, he had been waiting for something to happen, for someone to recognize his worth. Now, he realized that maybe he had to take control of his own story. Maybe this was the chance he had been waiting for, and maybe, just maybe, the world wasn't as stacked against him as he had always thought. Have you ever been given a second chance, and how did it feel to realize that someone was willing to believe in you when you thought no one would? Marcus's first few weeks on the job weren't easy. No one expected them to be. He had walked into the company with no illusions about what lay ahead. The expectations were high, and Marcus knew that proving himself meant doing more than just showing up. The work was challenging, and at times, the pressure felt overwhelming. He wasn't used to being part of a well-oiled machine. His previous jobs had been more about surviving than excelling. But something about this job, this new chapter, was different. The first few days were a whirlwind of introductions, training sessions, and unfamiliar routines. The work was more technical than anything Marcus had done before, but he didn't shy away from it. With his determination fueling him, he stayed late, asking questions, and absorbing everything he could. His coworkers, a diverse group of people with backgrounds similar to his, people who had once felt overlooked or underappreciated, were willing to lend a hand. Many of them had their own stories of struggle, stories that mirrored his own. As Marcus worked alongside his new colleagues, he began to realize something important. He wasn't alone. The company's culture, one of resilience and inclusion, wasn't just a corporate slogan, it was real. He connected with people who had faced hardships similar to his. Some had been in and out of prison, others had battled addiction or fought their way through broken homes. Yet, all of them had one thing in common: a relentless desire to better their lives. In the early mornings and late nights, Marcus found himself learning new skills, not just technical skills related to his job, but life lessons that came from the shared experiences of his coworkers. One of the most unexpected things Marcus discovered was that his tattoos, which once felt like chains holding him back, were no longer something to hide. At first, he thought his appearance might still be a problem. But the longer he worked at the company, the more he realized that his past wasn't something people feared. It was something they respected. His tattoos told a story of survival, of overcoming obstacles, and that was something his colleagues could relate to. In a way, they became symbols of his perseverance, a mark of his journey rather than his failure. Every day, he felt himself growing more confident in his work and in his place within the company. His hands, once clenched with frustration and doubt, now moved with purpose and precision. He learned to use the skills he had, to adapt to the new environment, and to prove himself not just to his boss but to himself. Slowly, he began to feel like he belonged. His contributions were noticed, and while he didn't expect any special treatment, he found himself receiving recognition from those around him. His hard work was paying off. As weeks turned into months, Marcus's confidence soared. He no longer saw himself as just another man stuck in a cycle of failure. Instead, he was a valuable member of a team, someone who could be counted on. And it wasn't just the job that was changing him, his entire mindset was evolving. For the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to take pride in his work. He understood what it felt like to push past the barriers that once held him back and to embrace the opportunities that came with his effort. It was around this time that the company held its quarterly meeting. The CEO, Tom, stood in front of the employees with a sense of pride in his voice as he spoke about the company's success and the impact of recent changes. Thanks to the policies under the current administration, he began, we've been able to hire more local talent than ever before. We've given people a chance. People like Marcus, people who have faced adversity but never gave up. And look at where we are today, thriving, growing, and contributing to our community. Marcus, who had been quietly listening from the back, couldn't believe his ears. The CEO was talking about him, about people like him, about how the company's success was inextricably linked to the new immigration policies that allowed more American workers to find opportunities. It was a stark contrast to the days when Marcus had been convinced that he would never escape the limitations of his past. Now, his story was being used as a testament to the power of hard work and second chances. The CEO continued, "We've hired hundreds of people who have struggled just to find steady work. And because of this, we've seen a shift, a new workforce, one that is eager, dedicated, and ready to prove their worth." Marcus's story is just one example of how these policies have changed lives. We're building a future here together. As Marcus sat there, listening to the applause around him, he felt a sense of pride he had never known before. The world, which once seemed like a cold and unyielding place, was now opening up to him. He wasn't just an ex-con with tattoos, he was a man who had fought his way to a better future. And the policies that many had criticized were now directly responsible for his success. It wasn't just about getting a job anymore, it was about reshaping his identity, about showing that people like him had value, that people like him could thrive if given the chance. Have you ever felt like a part of something bigger than yourself? How did it feel to realize that your success wasn't just yours alone, but a result of the opportunities that allowed you to shine? Months passed, and Marcus had come a long way from the man who walked into the company with nothing but a troubled past and a burning desire to change. He had worked tirelessly, learned new skills, and gained the respect of his peers. His transformation was not just about climbing the corporate ladder, it was about rediscovering his worth, about learning that he was capable of achieving things he once thought impossible. Now, he found himself in a position he hadn't dreamed of: promotion. Marcus had been promoted to team lead, a position that came with greater responsibilities, but also a sense of accomplishment. It was the first time he truly felt like he was being seen for more than just the mistakes of his past. He wasn't the man with tattoos and a rough history anymore. He was a leader, someone others looked to for guidance. His new role allowed him to help other employees, many of whom had similar struggles, find their footing in the company, just as he had. One day, as he sat in his office, reflecting on how far he had come, Marcus couldn't help but think back to how it all started. He remembered the day when his aunt had urged him to give the new job a shot, to take a risk and apply. Back then, Marcus hadn't fully understood the significance of the policies that were being put in place under the new administration. All he knew was that it was a chance, a lifeline that could pull him out of the life he had been living. It was a risk, and he had almost ignored it. But his aunt's words kept him focused. She had told him, "Don't let the world tell you who you are. You are who you decide to be." It was her belief in him that had sparked the fire that drove him to take that first step.